So we are here today on this beautiful Saturday afternoon in the Greenwood Cemetery, and Sarah and I have been talking about art and public art and its function in terms of what it can bring or not bring to the community, and we have been talking about this for a very long time, and so we decided to do a little podcast to kind of share our thoughts with everybody. I think we've picked a spot that has bugs that like me, so I might hit myself a few times as we're talking.
That's all right.
So, Sarah, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Okay. So I will say, what was I going to say? I was going to say something a minute ago in response to what you were saying. And now I've messed up the flow.
That's okay. We can edit a lot of stuff,
Yeah.
and we can also just leave it as is. So just tell people like what your experience was, as an artist and with art in general, and maybe your relationship to what art can do for the community's well-being.
Right. And I think one of the reasons why we've been talking for so long is because that could just permeate every part of life. What is it like at a school? What is it like in a university or a neighborhood or a business? Or I think there's a lot of creative ways that people are curating, and there's a lot of creative ways that people are trying to get into bringing art to a more democratic sense. But I think what they feel is the value of art needs to be art itself and not the exclusivity or the prestige of whatever we consider the art community to be, like this, not maybe necessarily the gift that people think it is.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, do you want to talk about your experience, like who you are, just like very briefly, so
okay, yes, right, introductions. But I think what I was going to say is that like we're like, oh well, let's have a podcast, but I also feel like part of our research or part of our interest in this is like hearing lots of information and feedback along the way, or critiques of what we're saying, and so I feel more like it's hopefully like just a discussion to be passed around. Mm-hmm. Not like I would be an expert in this situation, but so I am Sarah Valerie, and I've been a painter for a very long time, and ironically having an interest in community arts because I'm probably never going to participate in a community art proposal or program because I'm a very private artist, and I feel very much like that that isolated experience or that personal experience is very central to me, to any arts practice or experience, and I feel like it gets a little bit lost in the shuffle. Mm-hmm. And that's also kind of fine with me because I don't think it should be defined as anything that has a particular power or a particular name or a particular prestige. All of those things can be very binding. So I think it should be able to like kind of grow and like show up when it's called. Somebody needs it. Right. As didn't Kiki Smith say that, like, make whatever you want. If it's needed, people will come and get it, one way or another. But I also work as an art therapist, and that also very much colors my view of how arts are used. So a lot of like very academic approaches to art kind of grind me the wrong way, because I'm like, no, this is about a kid making a drawing of a memory or like a feeling or a drawing that they are so uncomfortable with they leave it under the table, but they won't throw it away because it's a truth. Like mm-hmm. Those are things to me that are like the reason why we make art. So the commercialism and all of those things in between are very like sort of surreal and strange. Right. And I also feel very strongly about imposing like what you think art is onto other people.
Great. Well, thank you.
And how about you, Isabelle?
Well,
we luckily have very different backgrounds.
We have very different backgrounds. So, I worked as a commercial artist for a long time, first in theater as a painter, then as a digital artist in the video game industry, and I went back to school for sculpture. Was trained in a very academic environment. To me that was important to have that. I felt like I really needed those tools. And since then I've been working mostly doing public installations, and more I had been involving community in some sort of way. So sometimes I was in the art making process, Sometimes it was some sort of performance aspect that was part of the artwork. And the past few years, I feel like I don't really want to do this anymore. I've come across a lot of things that I think are problematic in the way public art is being approached and the way it's being offered and the way it's involving or not involving community. So you and I have been talking about this for a long time, because this is something that is not a new issue. The problems kind of appeared almost immediately, and as I kept on working, with as a community or socially engaged artist, I felt like I was becoming more and more aware of those problems, and you and I started talking about this a few years ago, and so we decided to do this podcast. So, and because I think we do have very different approaches to how we make art. I think it's very interesting that we've come to some of the same conclusions about what art can and cannot be. So I think to me that was like the really most interesting part about those conversations is that your approach is very private and very individual, oriented towards your individual development, and mine was more public oriented. I kind of wanted to circumvent the gallery system and not have art be a commodity that you can buy, but have something that everybody could see for free and appreciate. And and as you start working within systems of funding, all those ideals sort of like get shattered,
Right.
one by
The difference
one.
between like nonprofit and for-profit are not necessarily that different.
Right, right. So, so I'm not sure. So we had a list of questions, and now I forgot where I put them. But we were talking about the.
Well,
So
one
let's
thing I
talk a
would
little
say
bit
that
about.
I think one of the things that we did have something in common is that because of all the person-to-person interactions you had
Yes.
when you were working, whether they were satisfying or very like unsatisfying or confusing, and when you felt like, should an artist be doing this or not doing this?
Right, right. Well, I think so maybe I can start with that. So I think like the first time I was wondering if an artist should be doing this at all was a residency that I actually really enjoyed doing in the Bronx, and this was post Hurricane Sandy, and the city of New York decided they were going to give grants to each borough to do some sort of artwork that was going to be outreach about emergency preparedness. So here I was in the Bronx, and I really enjoyed what I was doing, but my role as an artist was supposed to be, to somehow make people more ready for the next hurricane or the next flood, right? And it seemed to be...
How did you get that position? Did you describe your expertise in flood preparedness?
Well, no, and as a matter of fact, I don't think I ever talked once about, flood preparation, to anybody in the Bronx. When I got there, I was doing a mobile classroom, so I had like a little shopping cart that I was moving around in the Bronx, and I was asking people to make artwork with me, and it was very obvious that a lot of people had not done any art in ages, especially the adults were just like, oh my God, I haven't done this in ages. People were embarrassed. Some kids had never even had an art class. So they themselves were also embarrassed about participating, and I had to get like little stencils so that they would like very, slowly ease their way into actually making art with me. And so, the sense of it was just like, at the end of the residency, I'm like, what the hell did I do? What the hell did I actually accomplish here? On the one hand, I think that the people who participated with me, really enjoyed it. But on the other hand, it was like just one summer, and maybe I talked to someone for like 10 minutes, so that's 10 minutes of their lives that I touched, and maybe, who knows, it has like, incredible consequences for them, and it's completely changed their lives. but I kind of doubt it, So that was sort of the first time where
did you talk to anyone about flood preparedness?
not then.
Right, but so you had a lot of discussions, though. It sounded like that sometimes were very personal.
I had a lot of discussions. Like the first time I actually went out, there was a little park where they had given me a studio space, and there were two couples barbecuing in the park, and they didn't want to do artwork. They were like, no, we don't want to do this. And of course I insisted, and I said, it's not, who cares what you do? I just want you to kind of like express yourselves, and they really got into it. And we spent like maybe an hour, working together in the park and chit-chatting. And one girl said, "Oh, well, I'm gonna do." So I had like little tiles that people could paint on, and one girl said, "Oh, I'm gonna do a tile about love because my heart is shattered." And I was just like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Like what happened?" And she said that her husband was now in jail because he broke her arm, and she didn't know how she felt about him anymore, whether or not she wanted to have him back in his life or in her life or not. And I'm like, well, what do I say to that? I don't know how to handle this. I don't know how to handle this, except being a decent human being. But I'm just like, holy shit, I can actually do more harm here than good. So I'm in this position as an artist, I'm just like, oh, you're the artist. Everybody loves you. Just do whatever you want, then, everything will be magically solved. And I came across some like real problems that I was completely unprepared for. And of course that had nothing to do with flood preparedness. So at the end of the residency, like I said, you kind of like scratch your head and you go like, was that money wisely spent by the city? Like if you want to do flood preparedness, like actually have people who are experts at that, and have the community participate in like how to actually prepare for a flood, and if you want to do community art, have someone that actually is there basically forever, like don't have someone that comes in for 3 months, does whatever, and then we can all feel good about, like how great we involve the community, but in the end, like what have we actually accomplished?
What have you built on? Because and I mean, I have so many thoughts about that experience you had. Like, first of all, like the funders had this idea of like, this is the reason or the excuse that we're having this, and I feel like that's never what it turns out to be about anyway. I know like there are so many art therapy programs in the school that are funded based on, are they preventing, school absences or not? But like obviously when you're in a person-to-person interaction, the child knows nothing about that.
Right.
So they're just having their session, like this woman who found you and was like, I need somebody to listen to me, and maybe everyone in her family had an opinion about what she should do with that relationship, and you were the only person who wasn't going to have an opinion about that.
Right.
And so that could have been really crucial for someone to just have somebody to listen to, and and people seek that out, and they also like often don't share when they're not ready, but I think and it might have been very different if you'd been there forever, because she'd know you and want you to like her and like all these things.
True. Yeah, and the outcome might not have been as good for her. She might not have been able to have that conversation.
More. Yeah, you might have done it in that instance. It might have been really good for her. Like it clearly was something that like was very personal to her and needed to happen. And there you both were. But I also know it was like uncomfortable for you, like wondering like.
Yeah, it wasn't really so much uncomfortable. Like I felt really bad. That I had no solution for her, and also I'm just like, what am I doing as an artist? Like why am I being tasked as an artist? That basically is not trained in social work or therapy or anything really except art. And I'm not saying that's all I know, but that's the majority of what I know, and I also feel that maybe someone would have reacted differently, like someone with a different personality would have reacted,
and even every therapist would have reacted
right. And so it feels like a very risky way to try to do outreach with the community and try to say we have actually done something good for the community, because have you? I don't know.
Right. And I think, like we said, like risk is extremely interesting in these situations, and I also have many, many thoughts about that. First, I will say that I think in some ways, in this case, maybe the element of risk of like not knowing what people are going to want or ask for or bring to the table is the way to involve the community, because like to you, it's like an open question. I have no idea what to prepare for, but that's like the community saying like this, what I brought to you is what you need to prepare for. So it's just like that.
Right.
Opening the door for that communication to have an open, like undefined space. I do feel that when I've seen like the New York Committee, is it the New York Committee of Cultural Affairs? I always forget every single acronym.
The Department of Cultural Affairs.
Right. When they have when they put out calls for artists to do a proposal or a project with highly traumatized groups of people, like children who are growing up in foster care or veterans, and they don't have a mental health component for that. This is like you're going to meet people in the neighborhood, and everyone that we know has something going on. So you're going to meet someone who's stressed, but you're like targeting these people because there is something that you assume they need help with. You should have a mental health person.
Right.
A mental health person. A mental health, a mental health person. A mental health professional involved in some way. Like, and honestly, a lot of mental health professionals don't also have training in using art as part of their practice, and it's interesting to me sometimes how people respond to things where I'm like, oh, that is not how I would take that. Like, yeah, that looks like a happy picture, but like, this isn't happy. This is happy. Yeah, there should be, even if it's the artist leading the project, because the artist themselves is going to need support.
Right.
And they're going to run up against those things where a kid or a participant has a problem, and it's going to stress them out and bring up their own feelings. Particularly, I think sometimes people are drawn saying like, well, I went through that, so I'm the one to talk to them. And I think that would also sound appealing to funders, like, oh, you're experienced, you would understand. But like, that's going to bring up a lot of difficult feelings for them, and they may need support.
Right. And I think that brings up, like, I think my biggest problem with all of this is that it feels that, so, obviously, artists need to get paid. So obviously there's going to be someone behind, generating money, and they have an agenda. And it feels, or it's felt to me, as I've done more of those projects, that you have funding agencies, and whoever they could be, it could be a philanthropy, or it could be, a city government or a municipality or whatever, it feels that they want to kill like a few birds at least with just one stone. Yeah. So here, we don't really have a lot of money for, actual community social work, and we also don't have a lot of meaningful art. So we're just going to smash them together and have this one person who may or may not be trained.
But
and then
you
we
actually
can
have so many art therapists in this community that you could fund. Just saying.
Just saying.
To the camera.
and so it feels like, we're cutting corners, and then we can say to, the registered voters or whoever is actually giving the money behind all of this, the donors or, whatever, we can say, well, look at all the great work that we've done. We've had this artist do this wonderful residency about, emergency preparedness. In the meantime, Hunts Point is still not prepared for the next hurricane. It's still very much at risk, and there are more markets there than they were when I went, 4 years ago. So, if we actually want to solve social problems, I feel like we really just should concentrate on that. Yeah. And maybe art is a small component of that. I'm not saying, that can't be part of it, but it feels to me that most proposals that I see now for public art always have to have like some sort of like miracle cure for social ills, and I'm like, this is just not the way to go. This is not the way to go.
And again, there are people trained for that.
And there are people trained for that. So if you actually want to have, art therapy in your neighborhood, if you think that that's going to actually help, the local community, then have someone there, full time, and working with everybody.
I
you
think
know,
that
and
would
then
be-
public art can be something else. And it doesn't mean that the community cannot be involved with public art, but they can be involved as art. You know, it's art or artists, you know, like the art for pure art, you know,
Yeah.
not because you want to solve the drug problem in your community. Or,
Yeah,
you know?
I think our whole I think the culture, and I'll speak for America, and I mean, places that I have traveled to feel like they are much more at home with art, like having its own life or being sort of spontaneous or not controlled or like commodified in such a way that it needs such a definition to show you how valuable it is. But I think we live in this very utilitarian culture, and so they don't know what to do with art because you can't. Its power is not something you can stick a pin into, and you don't get to point it at something and have the exact desired effect that you want. You don't get to control it, and that's what its power is.
Right.
So
And it actually
to
comes
unleash
back-
that, you
yeah.
have to stop trying to control it and focus it and point it at things.
Right.
And
I'm sorry, you know, because I was thinking about that. So, you know, I've been thinking about the NEA, who's been in danger of getting completely defunded, you know. And when it was started by LBJ in the 60s, you know, his idea was that a great nation deserves great art. And artists would just get a grant and they could do whatever they want.
Yes,
just
perfect.
make art. And, you know, in the 90s, we had the culture wars, and that idea was completely erased from the mission of the NEA. You know, like basically, we could not give art, you know, money directly to artists to do whatever
Right, you've
they
gotta
wanted.
justify.
You got to justify it. Well, not only that, you know, because artists will do something that's like anti-Christian, or you know, pornographic, or you know, they're out of control. So you know, there's no respect for like what the artists do. And so therefore, you know, now we have this mishmash of things where, you know, everybody's afraid of doing permanent artwork. Artists are not funded directly by the NEA. There are no individual grants anymore. And we only value art, like you said, because, you know, it's going to have some sort of outcome that's tangible.
Right. Or
you know.
it gives you like a prestige to know about it or to have it, or
Right. So, you know, and I'm mostly talking about, you know, public art, like the
Yeah.
function of public art. And I think, you know, one of the reasons we started talking about it is that it does become unfair to people who just want to do art on their own, you know, like who are not interested in public art, who are not interested in necessarily having, you know, like your private practice as an artist is just art. You know, like you leave your art therapy behind when you go into your studio. And so is it fair now, or is it even good for society to just put so much pressure on the artist of like being the miracle cure for everything, as opposed to just generating art? Because art is like the canary in the coal mine for a society. If you don't have great art, you probably don't have a great society.
something's going on with you.
Something is going on.
Or you're ignoring all your great artists.
Right.
You know, they're out there and they're not. Yeah, I get all these thoughts going, then I'm like, which one?
Which one do I pick first?
many.
We can do a second podcast. It's actually,
okay,
you know,
that's good.
if this is successful,
I mean,
if we run
so
out
I
of
guess-
batteries.
I guess if we go back to like that idea of like a permanent space and a space that is for the community, and you know, we were talking about Mindy Full of Love's research, and I don't know if you got to watch any of the videos or,
No.
but yeah, anyone who ever listens to this, please listen to Mindy Full of Love's research. She is a psychiatrist, and she has studied neighborhoods and like the regrowth of neighborhoods and the community of neighborhoods, and just the simple act of like people just being together is being a very healing thing, and people just knowing your neighbors is being a very healing thing. I think if you wanted to like give art to a community, I think you would give them a beautifully arranged art studio where people could come and just meet. They might have tea, they might make art, they might look at some art, and you could have an art therapist there, or a few people who'd be prepared to like walk people who are new to the process, get them started. And then I think within that, like if you had a community there and people were established and had relationships, it would be great to have visiting artists come in.
Sure.
And
do
do
like
a
special
workshop.
projects.
But
yeah.
like within this, instead of saying like we're sending this emissary into your community because they're super special and you get to benefit from the super specialness, And that's like
I know. It's so problematic, you know. But again, you know, I kind of want you to talk about the, you know, your practice and feeling that there are fewer opportunities for people who just want to make art, just because art is great, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, clearly I do know a lot of painters who do that, but it is hard, like when I'm looking for like a funded residency, or if I'm looking for, you know, studio space, like how many artists are applying for the same residencies, like they're like, thank you, we had 12,000 applicants for this. You know, yeah, every time like you look at an opportunity, or you're asked to write a proposal, there has to be like a social aspect to it. There has to be, you know, a pre-plan to it. And I'm like, it cannot work that way. I actually like, even when I want to do something that somebody has requested me to do, like my whole like insides just turn, and I swear it's just like, oh, stick figure. What? Like I have no comprehension unless it's something that's just happening as it happens. And there was this great article that we just read in my color marathon class with Caitlin McDonough on emergence, and like the idea of like a painting becoming itself. Like you're working and you're like, that's not right, this isn't right, and then like certain like rules and balances start to come into play, and then you've got to work with those, and you're sort of narrowing down into, you're like, this is what it is. And that's also like, if I had a child come into an art room, I wouldn't tell them, all right, now you're going to draw your family, because that would be scary and confrontational, and all of their defenses would be up. But I'd like, here, I'm going to be here with you, I'm going to help you with the pencils, and they can make their own reflection through all those little choices about like shading and color and composition and the size and the smallest size, and a truth comes out of it. And I don't think anybody believes that any of those things are true. You know, when I was working with a lot of kids who didn't speak, a lot of people thought they couldn't have an intention if they didn't say it. But it's like they really can. Like they intentionally communicate things all the time, and sometimes there were kids who were like signaling with a picture, like very much like, you know, a rebus, like this is a code, you know, and other times like just really sharing an experience. It's like, you know, and it frustrates me when, you know, there are therapists of a more like psychoanalytic background who think like nothing is conscious until it's verbal. Like there is a lot of truth in this experience of perception, whether it's color, sound, weight, pressure, like that are very true to the body, and people need to be able to have that and be comfortable with it. And I think if more people had the chance to have that experience, it would be okay. You know, like they could tolerate a lot more frustrations. Not that I want frustrations to be heaped on them to be tolerated, but
right.
It helps you to become a more empathic person, and it helps you to be more tolerant of the experiences that you've had that are frightening or difficult, so you can channel them and work them in all these different ways. So I think it's important for everyone to have that experience, whether you like, you know, like an artist like we do, where like your whole life is sort of taken over by trying to find time and a place to do this,
right?
Or if, you know, you have a sketchbook that you carry around
right
once in a while,
right.
Or if you go sit in a place and like listen to all the sounds.
Yeah, and you know, and I think, you know, you're talking about funded residencies, you know, as something where, you know, you could have that space and time to, you know, to actually do that.
Yeah.
And there's very few of them that actually offer those opportunities for people like us who are, you know, not making money at doing art, but want to have the time, you know. And if you don't have some sort of outreach component, you know, you basically are not going to be given like, you know, here's 3 weeks, you know, a studio and all the time in the world, and we'll feed you so you don't have to think about it, you know, because we think that this actually adds value to our world, you know. Like the value has to be like this tangible, you know, oh, well, you're going to have to teach a class, or you're going to have to like somehow, you know, go around and talk to the community, and, you know, and it's just like, well, maybe I don't need that, and maybe that's not really what our society needs as well, you know. So maybe we can end it on this this note, and I think that maybe I'd like to start the conversation again next time and talk about what we think could happen because of the events that have happened in 2020. And I think a lot of people are kind of like purging and also really refocusing what's important and not important in their lives, and I wonder what impact is going to be on art and artists, and whether or not we're going to continue on this path, or if we can actually choose something where art becomes more important. We'll see.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question, because I also feel like along the scenario of like people maybe having more time for art, or maybe I feel like there is like this sort of simultaneous like more awareness of emotion, but also a need to separate from emotion.
Right.
That people are dealing with, and I think that would like very much come.
We've been followed by the weed whackers,
They love us.
which is
Our
why we need
biggest
to stop,
fans.
because they're back. But Sarah, thank you so much for coming, and I'm really glad we finally started doing a videotape, but I hope this was actually on. Let's check right now. Until next time.
Goodbye. Bye to you.